Hello, welcome everyone. So, this is chapter 4 of Birbal Sahani, Fossils and Paleobotany. The word paleobotany is made of two parts: paleo, which means old, and botany means it is related to plants. So, paleobotany refers to the study of ancient plants. Thus, paleobotany is a name of science for finding, studying, and identifying plants preserved in the rocks as fossils. These fossils represent the vegetation of the past. So, it is further extends this knowledge about past vegetation to learn about the climate of that time. The logic is simple. Vegetation at a place evolves in response to the climate. If climate changes, vegetation also changes. That is the reason one finds different kinds of vegetation in different places. We see plants with pointed and conical leaves at high altitude, thorny vegetations in the deserts, and broad leaved plants in the tropical areas. But inferring about the vegetation, we can make inferences about the climate. The study of fossils has another use. If a plant is known to exist only during a narrow time period, the discovery of that plant's fossils in sediment can tell us about the age of that sediment. Fossils also almost always found in sedimentary rocks that forms by layer deposition of sediment. Later, the weight of the sediments and resulting heat compact the sediment and turn it into a sedimentary rock. As coal formation results from cooking of vegetation, while buried in sediment at high temperatures and high pressure, the study of coal indicates the type of vegetation that evolved into coal. The study of fossils unfolds the forgotten past. It is impossible to go back in time and see the lost vegetation, but the fossils allows us a peek information into the past. For instance, plant fossils helps us to visualize what those plants looked like in the past. That is why Professor Sahani equated fossils to time machines. He meant that the study of fossils takes us into the past and we can see the vegetation that may not be existing anymore. Be of different types, sometimes buried under sediments over a long period of time. The plants are charred due to pressure and temperature there. Many charred remains of past food grains have been recovered from the archaeological sites. Sometimes the plants get flattened during the burial, but on recovery can still be identified based on their shapes, outlines of the organic remains, though there is some distortion. These are compression fossils. Sometimes leaves may get buried in the sediments. If the original organic material goes away but its impression can be seen, we call it impression fossils. Sometimes the organic material of the buried plant or of its part is largely eaten away by the insects and bacteria, but before that, deposition happens on that. It is mold and carries the impression of the original fruit, seed, or some other part. In many cases, the surface features of the object are preserved in this body made of salts, or minerals and are available for study even when the original plant or its part are gone. This happen this can happen in the case of seeds and fruits. By filling the mold with soft material, copies of the original fossil can be made. In some cases, the soft inner material of the plant part is lost to the surrounding or eaten away by bacteria, etc., as above, but then the empty space so created gets filled by salts or minerals present in the surroundings. Later, the outer layer, the soft but harder than the original inner material, also gets lost. But a replica of the original material is created. This is termed as cast. Plants also have pollen grains and spores. These are reproductive parts of plants. These are tiny objects, a small fraction as small as 1 by 100th of a in size. Advanced plants have pollen grains while comparatively primitive plants have spores. In general, the spores are smaller than the pollen grains but not always. The pollen grains has a very tough outer layer which is exine made of polymer called sporopollenin. The exine survives under the most difficult circumstances. In fact, it is chemically very strong. So strong that the sediment sample is boiled in acid and base to recover pollen grains from the sediment. While carbonates and even silica etc. get dissolved, the pollen grains survive intact. The Palaeopollen grains have identifiable unique shapes and unique surface features for each plant as seen in the picture taken with scanning electron microscope. As a result, the old or paleopollen grains and spores can be isolated and identified under microscope. This can tell us about the vegetation they belong to. This branch is termed as palynology or paleopalynology. Sometimes plants get buried in a water body. If water is slightly acidic, silica may be present in the dissolved form. If there are not too many bacteria to eat away the organic matter quickly, the dissolved carbonates and occasionally iron like elements present in the aquatic surrounding begin to enter the interior of the plant parts. For instance, the stem of a tree has its cells filled with silica. This process is very slow and may continue for lakhs of years. If the process is allowed to go on undisturbed for a long period of time, gradually all the organic material inside the cell is replaced by silica. The result is a petrified tree. These are termed petrification fossils. From the look of it, you may think it is a stem or a branch of an actual tree. But when you touch it or you try to lift it, you realize that it is now a stone. If you may a thin section of a stem, you may even see the cell structure under microscope. It may be noted that the softest parts like leaves may decay before silicification occurs. Today, we see petrified woods in places of Dindori, Mandala, and Seoni, Madhya Pradesh, Bolpur, West Bengal, Rajmahal, Jharkhand, and some other places like Jaisalmer in Rajasthan. These formed crores of years ago. In fact, at several sites of such specimens, fossil parks have been established around them, such as in Gugwa, which is Dindori in MP. There, one can see huge tree trunks in situ. They were too huge, several meters long and about half a meter thick, and too heavy to move through water current easily. In all likelihood, they are found today where they had been formed. The petrified wood has the shape as well as features of a tree trunk. There is hardly ever any cellulose or such organic material left in fossils. It is dominatingly comprised of silica and other materials like minerals. The present size may be much smaller than their original size, height, and girth. If the process of petrification was slow and undisturbed, the fine features of the cell structure of the stem would still be preserved. These are termed as petrified fossils. In the lab, thin sections of the samples may be made and the structures can be studied using microscope. This is useful in identification of the wood which transformed into fossils. There is another type of fossil called trace fossil. These are tracks found on sediments indicative of the movement of organisms and are seen even when organisms themselves are gone. Even the excreta of the organisms may get preserved. Dinosaur poop, called coprolite in technical language, is one example and has helped paleobotanists to prove that grass existed even when dinosaurs roamed the earth earlier than about 6.5 crore years ago. So we see that the liquids forget, but rocks remember, as O'Keefe had said. The fossils carry the valuable memories from the past. These are writings of nature. Birbal Sahni was a man who could read the scriptures imprinted in the rocks. The secret of his unusual choice of research field may be traced to his experiences during a young age and the background of his family. Many people have an impression that paleobotany is purely academic subject with no use to the society. This is not true. It, of course, tells us how vegetation appeared and evolved on Earth, and actually, it is far more interesting than that. Some interesting information learned from the plant fossils studied are as follows. In Chindwara, Madhya Pradesh, jackfruit grew about 6.5 crores years ago. The inference is based on a fossil recovered from there. The fossils may be seen in the Museum of BSIP, Lucknow. It is generally believed that the custard apple, Sharifa, reached India from Portugal, but based on its engravings on old Indian temples walls, such as at Sanchi and Mathura, people had doubts. Subsequent discoveries of its seeds quote from places like Shanghol in Punjab, Mirzapur, and Shonbhadra in UP changed the opinion. The radiocarbon dating of the nearby charcoal as well as seed established them to be about 3000-year old. Another example is of eucalyptus. It is generally believed that it came from Australia, but the findings of a 6.5 crore old fossil in India cast doubt on this general belief. There is another approach. Pollen grains being characteristic of a plant, their presence in the sediment tells us about the vegetation prevailing in those times. In the next step, Vegetation being responsive to climate, the presence of pollen grains and spores also indicate what kind of vegetation it was. Therefore, one can figure out what kind of climate was there in places these plants existed. It may surprise you to learn that Rajasthan, which has two-thirds of its area as desert today, was not always like that. About 25 lakh years ago, Rajasthan was a home to evergreen forests. This continued up to at least 18 lakh years ago. Many in between phases during which strong winds and sand dunes dominated have left little material evidence to infer about vegetation, but even as late as 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, Rajasthan had open grassland. Pollen grains and spores offer us this opportunity to learn about past climates. The study of plant fossils yields about valuable information. Not many people knew about agricultural practices in India. In India, we had the cultivation of grapes 2300 to 1500 years before Christ. This conclusion is based on the recovery of wooden seeds. Earlier people thought that grape cultivation happened during the Mughal period, but evidences of the cultivation of mehndi, that is henna, chameli, a type of jasmine, parijata, and lemon during the Harappa period have been found. More than 2500 years ago, the use of rita, that is soapberry, and amla, Indian gooseberry, was prevalent in South India. There are many other examples. In addition, there are applications of economic importance. We know that oil is recovered by drilling inside the earth. Oil is found in so-called traps. Generally, the oil basins are surrounded by impervious rocks and also capped by tough sediments that prevents the escape of oil from there. When exploring for oil, one can't keep on drilling inside indefinitely to reach these traps as drilling is expensive. So it is important to decide whether we are drilling at the right place. The formation of oil happened during certain time period. So if one finds pollen grains etc indicative of any of those time periods in a certain stratum layers of earth, one can continue drilling further. A similar approach is adopted in case of coal, which is formed from vegetation. Long ago, mainly during Gondwana period, about 25 crore years ago in India, huge forests got buried under sediment. They transformed into coal covered the over the following crores of years. Most of the coal in India is from the Gondwana period and is spread in Jharkhand, West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, and eastern Uttar Pradesh, etc. The coal was the coal from the tertiary period, about 5 crore to 15 crore years ago, is much less in amount and mostly confined to the northeast. Here also, one identifies the right stratum that may contain coal by looking at the pollen grains, spores, and other pollinofossils recovered from there. Given the major role of hydrocarbon, a combined term for petroleum, diesel, and hydrocarbon gases, and coal play in our life, we can appreciate why palynology is important for the society. With the saying, I stop with the late Professor Ramanujan, Professor Sir C.V. Raman, and Professor Chandrasekhar. Professor Sani shares the honor and the glory of having given his motherland an honored place in the world of science. Sani's mortal remains are no more, but he is one of the eternals whose work will live as long as science lives. and whose memory will always be cherished with deep love and administration by his innumerable friends and students. It's by C. Mahadevan. Thank you.